Alright, welcome back to the channel, guys. In this video we're going to be spending the day in Malibu, baby. Good morning, guys. So we are currently at the trailhead of Mugu Peak in Malibu. So from what I've researched, I think this is going to be the toughest hike yet of our trip. There's a big American flag at the peak and we are going to conquer this mountain and go get it. So yeah, let's go get it. We're just like 15 minutes into our hike, and right from the get-go it's really steep. That's kind of what we've done so far. I think round trip it's a 2-hour hike, so it's going to be 1 hour of this. It's a relatively short hike, but it's just very, very steep. The next bit we have to conquer is this really, really steep part of the mountain. I think this is supposed to be the steepest part. God damn it. All right, let's go. Right, so I think we've just done one of the most steepest parts of the mountain, and I think there is just one last little steep part of the mountain now, which hopefully should be the home run before we start seeing the American flag. All right, so we've just done the toughest part, I believe, of the hike, and right in front of me I can see the American flag, aka Mugu Peak. We've got the coastline there, and then we've got this coastline here in the background. Right, so I know it's very difficult to see here, but I'm going to try my best to point it out. That right there where I'm pointing to is San Nicolas Island, which is the most remote of the Channel Islands, and apparently it was also a candidate, I'll just keep pointing, apparently it was also a candidate for detonating the world's first atomic bomb during the Manhattan Project. So we are now midway back down the mountain from the Mugu Peak. Just a very slow and gentle winding route all the way back down to the parking lot. We are going to drive to Malibu Village. We're going to try the world famous lobster roll. Then we are going to eat, yes, that's going to be our appetizer. We're then going to go to the Malibu Farm restaurant. Apparently this place is quite popular among A-list celebrities, so you might run into a George Clooney or a Brad Pitt or a Julie Roberts while I'm just tucking into my lunch. We do have one more must visit or eat place, which is the Malibu Seafood restaurant. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of food now and a beach. That's it, not much else. So yeah, I'll speak to you when I get to Malibu Village. Okay, so we have now arrived into Malibu Village. The target now is the Broad Street Oyster Co, which is right in front of me actually. Right there in the distance. Let's get that famous lobster roll. Okay, so we've just got the world famous, but between me and you, I'll probably just say at least Malibu or California famous. Let's not go to the world stage just yet. Cheers. It's nice. It's really nice. I could have like I could probably have like 10 of these right now. Right, so we've just arrived at the Malibu Farm restaurant. Hello. Right, thank you very much. And we're going to go for the crab cake. I thought probably might be best to go for a seafood option. So yeah, really looking forward to it. There's a Malibu Farm cafe also at the end of the pier, but I think it's the same company. So there's the restaurant, which is the more formal one at the start of the pier, and then there's the more casual eatery at the end of the pier, and that serves like more casual food like burgers and chips, and it's more like a cafe. When I went to the end of the pier, there was also a little shop there. I finally managed to find a nice white t-shirt that I like. I think I'll show you guys here, a Malibu t-shirt. Might even sport it when I'm on Zuma Beach, which consequently is going to be our next stop. Really looking forward to seeing what the beach looks like. Right, so right now we are currently sitting on Zuma Beach, Malibu, which is one of the most popular beaches in the Malibu area. There's quite a few different beaches in Malibu. I think there's Carbon Beach, there's El Matador Beach, which is just where you can see like the amazing sunset, and there's also Paradise Cove Beach, which is where we are going to be visiting next after Zuma. Malibu is home to a lot of the billionaires. It's got a lot of these multi-millionaire mansions, and it's a very wealthy area. Kind of been my observation of Malibu so far. So I think the plan is now we're just going to relax and enjoy the sunshine on Zuma Beach. Before then, shortly, we're going to head over to the Paradise Cove Beach. There's also a really nice pier, which I think would be a really nice spot to go and watch the sunset before I head over to the Malibu seafood restaurant for dinner. Right, so just going to switch off the camera and chill out for a bit, and I'll speak to you when I get to Paradise Cove Beach. Right guys, so we are now in Paradise Cove, which is I think the beach where some of the famous TV shows and movies were filmed, such as Point Break, Baywatch, and also I think some scenes from American Pie. Last week was quite a mild week, I would say. There wasn't any truly like massive pots or big swings, either winning or losing, that occurred last week. Yeah, so this session that I want to go through kind of reflects that, but still I think there are a couple of hands which I hope you will find interesting. Right, so let's go through one of our sessions last week and dive straight into the action. So first hand of the session, there is an under the gun limp, and we look down in early position with pocket 10s. So we decide to make it 25 to go, and then the action falls to the button who makes the call, the big blind calls, and the under the gun also calls. So we are now going 4 ways to the flop, which comes pretty decent. It comes 7 high, so it comes 7, 4, deuce, rainbow. So we flop ourselves an overpair. Action checks to me, and I think on this board texture, I don't think we necessarily need to bet too big here into 3 other opponents, just so we can fold out some high cards and also get some value from some weaker 1 pair type hands. So that's what we decided to do. We decided to put in a bet of $25, so just a quarter of the pot. Button then thinks for a while before making the raise, and so he decides to make it $100. Action then folds back to us, and now we have a decision. I think the important thing to be cognizant of in this spot is that given we just put in a very small C bet of just a quarter pot, that when we get raised, ranges are a lot wider here than if we had, for example, bet like 75% of the pot and then get raised. When we bet small, we can have some ace kings and some ace queens, and also some like kind of pocket 5s or pocket 6s here. So when villain raises, he can have hands like 8s and 9s, for example, and not necessarily have like flop 2 pairs or sets. So with this in mind, I think if we decided to put in another raise on the flop, I think we would then be over repping our hand, and I think all worse hands would fold and only better hands would continue. So having considered all of the above, I decided to continue with a flat call. So we're now off to the turn, and the turn comes another 4. So we decide to continue checking, which kind of makes sense given the line we took on the flop. And then the button then continues betting, but just for $100, which is also a really good sign that villain has not flopped like a monster hand. I think with this bet sizing, he is really repping a hand that kind of just about beats a 7x, but not a hand that is like 2 pair plus, for example. So again, with the same logic as on the flop, I don't think we want to raise here in this spot, as I think again we would be over-repping our hand. So we decide to continue with a flat call and see how the action develops on the river. And the river comes an offsuit deuce. Now in this spot, I think in hindsight, I think I probably would have liked to lead in this spot, just purely because I think the kind of hands that he's repping, I don't think would be very likely to be triple barreling here, but who knows, sometimes people do pretty random things. So we decide to check for a 3rd time, and then villain, to my disappointment, snap checks back, which pretty much confirms exactly what he has. So I table my hand, already certain that I've won the hand, and then villain taps the table. He says nice hand, and he actually showed pocket 8s. So we are going to drag this pot.
Everything.
Thank you.
Right, in the next interesting hand of the session, there's been a few players that have been stacked and have since left the table, and there is now a new player that has joined our table, and he is on our direct right. And I've never played with this player before, but having seen a few of the hands that he's played already, I've tagged him as probably one of the loosest, most aggressive kind of calling stations, if that makes sense. So just to give you an idea of what he's like, I saw this player 3-bet an under the gun raiser, and then the under the gun raiser jams his stack for $500, and then he snap calls with Queen 8 offsuit. So I think that piece of information is everything you need to know. So in this hand, we look down under the gun with pocket 6s. So that's good enough for a raise, so we make it $20 to go. Action then folds to the big blind, who is the aforementioned super loose aggro player, and he defends his button. So we are now going heads up to the flop, which comes pretty decent. It comes Queen 6-3, but all clubs. So we have flopped a set on a monotone board. Big blind checks, actions on us, and I think we have a pretty standard range c-bet here for small. We put in a c-bet of $15. And then villain pretty much snap raises to $35. I think the best move here is to play a call and see how the action develops on later streets. So we decide to make the call, and then we're off to the turn. And then the turn comes like a 9 of spades. Villain now just very quickly and just fumbly dumps in a load of $5 chips. So I'm like, okay, so you know, how much is that? The dealer cuts it out and then announces it was a bet of $85. So in this spot here, I think we just have a pretty standard spot of kind of calling turn and calling river, given we're playing against this player type who is very likely to be barreling most river cards. And I think we're just going to have to call down here, especially with a hand as strong as a set. So we make the call, and now we are off to the river, and I'm just praying for no club. The river then comes like another brick, and then villain then announces $250. I decide to very quickly make the call even before villains put the chips in, and he tables Queen 7 of diamonds for a top pair. So yeah, that's no good, sir. We have a set, so we are going to win this pot. Right, so we only played for like another hour or so at the table before we deemed that the action was not quite up to scratch. So we decided to move tables, and then we came across this next interesting hand. So in this hand, we looked down under the gun with pocket queens. So pretty standard open here, so we make it $20 to go. There are 2 callers behind us from early position, and then the low jack then looks at his cards, tanks for a while, and then, well, we pretty much know what's coming here. And then he decides to put in a squeeze to $100. Action now folds back to us, and now we ponder our options. First off, I would say that the $100 is quite a small squeeze here, relatively speaking. I think with the in-position player who's putting in the squeeze, especially with 2 callers behind us, should be making at least a 5 to 6x raise here, i.e. maybe like $125 to $150. So for that reason, and especially given the player tendencies that I've observed in this player pool, this player should never really have us beat. More accurately, I should say, I don't think this player should ever have aces or kings in the spot. So I think these hands would be raising larger. But even having considered that, I wanted to underrep my hand so I could maximize my value on later streets. So we decide to just flat call here with the queens. The two early position callers behind us make the fold, so we are now heads up to the flop. And the flop comes king 8-3, 2 spades. We now check to the raiser, which is a pretty normal thing to do, and then the low jack checks back. So I think when he checks back, I think we definitely have the best hand here. I don't think he really has much ace king or king x for that matter. But I think given that he did show a bit of strength pre-flop, his most likely holdings is going to have to be like jacks or tens or maybe like nines, which I would say probably a bit unlikely. I think it's got to be like jacks or tens to be fair. So we are now off to the turn card, which comes an offsuit 9. And now we have a pretty clear bet. I think in terms of sizing, I don't think we want to bet too big here, given we put villain on a hand like jacks or tens, so not really a strong hand, and hands that are going to be quite difficult to continue versus like half pot type sizing bets. Jacks or tens, given we also have these hands crushed and we don't really need to worry too much about equity denial. I think a really small bet makes the most sense here. So we decide to lead into our opponent to the tune of $75. Villain then thinks for a little while before making the call. So we are now off to the river card, which comes like another brick. And I think in this spot, we definitely do want to continue betting here, as the aforementioned hands in the range that I've put villain on, like jacks or tens, for example, would surely be snap checking back. And we don't want that to happen, obviously, when we have him beat. So we decided to put another bet of like, I think it was like $125. So another very small bet. And the villain then goes deep into the tank. He's thinking and thinking, and this is typically a really good sign that you've made a really good bet sizing, is when your opponent is deep into the tank and he's kind of a bit indifferent between calling and folding, for example. You don't want to take lines where your opponent has a very easy decision. So after thinking for quite a little while, villain then reluctantly makes the fold. So we get to drag in this pot. In this next hand, the action folds to the button, who opens the pot to $25. And we look down in the small blind, yet again, at pocket queens. So we put in the 3-bet here and raise it up to $115. Big blind folds, and then the button then ponders his options before making the call. So we are now off to the flop, and the flop comes ace, 3, 9, 2 clubs. And we have the queen of clubs in our hand. So again, not really the ideal flop for queens, given there's an ace or a king on board. And against this player type, who I don't think is very, very tricky, and we'd be playing his hand pretty honestly here, I decide to start with a check and see what villain does, so I could kind of range his holdings appropriately. Villain then checks back the flop. So in my mind, I think we have the best hand, and villain doesn't really have an ace. We're off to the turn card, which comes a 7 of clubs. So the front door flush now completes, and I think with the line that villain's taken, he can very easily have a flush draw, which decided to check back the flop and has now binged it on the turn. With this in mind, I didn't want to start delay c-betting this card, so I decided to check for a second time. Villain then thinks for a little while before then checking back. So again, with this piece of information, I don't think villain has a flush on the turn. I know it kind of sucks that we kind of have to find out where we stand after villain has acted, but that's just simply the disadvantage of playing out of position. So we are now off to the river card, which comes a deuce of clubs. So now we improve to a queen high flush. And I think in this spot, again, given this player type, unless he's got the king of clubs, or maybe even like a strong flush, like a jack of clubs, I don't really see villain betting this hand, given we were the pre-flop 3-better and we have the biggest clubs in our range. So in this spot, I think it was a better line to take to lead out rather than to check call. Pretty much never really check raising with this hand against this player type. We decided to lead out for, I think it was like $110. then villain looks a bit upset, doesn't really know what to do, which in my mind is a really good sign. And then villain then slides in the call, we share our hand, and it's good. So on to the next hand. There is an under the gun limp, and then there is an early position call, and then we look down next to act with ace king. So we decide to bump it up to $25. Action then falls to under the gun, who makes the call, and then the +1 player, who just overlimped after the under the gun limper, now decides to raise to $125. So yeah, really odd here, and yeah, I guess maybe some alarm bells could be ringing here, but given we got ace king and he's only playing like a $300 effective stack, I don't see any way for us to ever get away from this hand. So we just have a pretty standard decision here and rip it in for the rest of his stack, which is like $400 effective. The under the gun makes the fold, and then the +1 snap calls. We are now off to see all 5 cards. The flop comes deuce 5-5, the turn comes I think a 7, and then the river comes a very glorious king. We table a hand, and villain then kind of scoffs at what we have, and then mucks his cards. So yeah, not exactly a very interesting hand, but still a nice pot to win nonetheless. On to the last interesting hand of the session. In this hand, the action folds to us in the hijack, and we look down at ace jack of spades. So we make it $20 to go. The cutoff then makes the call, and then the button, who's a pretty snug player, decides to put in the squeeze to $60. Action now folds back to us, and I think in this spot calling is a better line to take, I think, rather than for betting as a bluff. I think in this spot I would much rather go to the flop with suited ace jacks rather than kind of for betting. I know it may sound counterintuitive, but I think if I wanted to bluff, I'd rather choose an offsuit ace jack if we're just going to take down the pot pre-flop and not need to kind of go to the streets. We decide to make the call, the cutoff folds, and now we are heads up to the flop. And the flop comes jack high with 1 spade. Pretty decent flop for us, given we got top and we got a backdoor flush draw. We check it over to the pre-flop aggressor, and then the villain then decides to bet $75. So right off the bat, given this sizing from this player type, believe it or not, I actually felt I was already beat. What really sucks is that I feel we have pretty much the very bottom of our continuing range here, and I really don't think we can fold just yet, even though I think we're beat. So I think this is a really close spot here. But after a little while, I decide to make the call and see a turn card, even though I'm not happy about it. And then the turn then comes an 8 of spades. So our hand now improves, and it's kind of keeping us a bit more interested in this hand. So we decide to check again, and then villain now sizes up to $200. And I'm really not happy here, because to be fair, I felt we would beat pre-flop, I felt we would beat on the flop, and I feel like we're beat on the turn, but our hand just keeps improving and improving. And I think $200 as well is pretty much like really close to the maximum that I think I would pay to continue with this hand in this spot. I did really seriously consider folding here, even though as crazy as that may sound GTO wise, but I think I just couldn't quite resist seeing one more card, especially when we improved with the nut flush draw. And given I ranged my opponent on like an overpair, like kings or queens, I think we have a decent amount of equity to improve on the river. After pondering for quite a while, we decide to make the call. And then the river breaks out. Our dreams are now shattered. So we now decide to check for a third time. Don't see any other play other than checking here. And then villain quite quickly bets $400. So of course we have a very easy decision here, and we pretty much snap fold. And just as we kind of tap on the table and we say nice hand, villain then kindly showed us pocket jacks. So yeah, our reader was confirmed, we would beat all the way, and we just had the nightmare flop for us that just kept on improving just to keep us interested just enough to pay him at least on the flop and the turn. But hey, at least we got away from the river. Right, so that rounds up the last interesting hand that we played from that session. So summary for the week, we managed to end the week last week up 1.1k. So yeah, pretty pleased. We're still moving in the right direction. I think we are planning to play some 5-10 for our last remaining 2 weeks of poker at the Commerce. So hopefully we might be able to see some much bigger pots and some more decent action. Right guys, so now I think the sun is now pretty much starting to set, which is a cue for me to now head to the Malibu seafood restaurant to get my ahi tuna burger. So yeah, that's it from me for now. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Peace.